The year was 1820, late October, and these woods west of the Mississippi were still raw and unforgiving. I was 32 that year, lean and weathered from 3 seasons of this life, with hands that knew the weight of steel traps and eyes that had learned to read every sign the wilderness offered. My wife waited for me at the settlement downriver, and I carried the weight of our shared dream, a land claim that needed my hands to make it real. This trapping season was my chance to earn the money we needed for tools, seed, and livestock, enough to build the cabin and plow the first fields before winter closed in again. I had arrived at this clearing 2 days earlier with my mule and the 2-wheeled cart that carried my traps, black powder, shot, and canvas. The mule had snorted and stamped as I unhitched it, its ears twitching at the unfamiliar scents of this particular stretch of woods. I'd hobbled it near the stream where the grass grew thick and green, then backed the cart against a fallen log for shelter from the wind. A simple lean-to of canvas stretched between 2 trees served as my shelter, the fabric already stiff with morning dew, and a small ring of stones sat ready for the evening cook fire. That morning I'd shouldered my flintlock long rifle, the smooth walnut stock warm against my palm, tucked the flintlock pistol into my belt beside the large sheath knife, and set out on foot along the stream to place my traps. The air was cool and damp against my face, heavy with the sharp scent of pine needles and wet earth, undercut by the faint smoke-tanned smell of my own buckskin shirt. My moccasins made little sound on the soft ground as I moved deeper into the woods, the filtered sunlight falling in thin green shafts through the dense canopy above. I worked methodically, setting the steel traps in the shallows where the water slowed, the cold bite of the stream numbing my fingers as I worked the mechanisms into place. I marked each location with a notched stick so I could find them again at dusk, my breath visible in the cool morning air. The forest felt alive around me, the steady murmur of the stream over smooth stones, the occasional call of a jay echoing through the trees, the rustle of small creatures in the underbrush. But as the morning wore on, something began to feel different. The usual sounds of the woods seemed muted, as if the forest itself were listening. I paused, listening, but heard nothing out of place. I shook off the feeling and kept moving, unaware that something massive and hungry was already watching me from the shadows. I kept walking along the stream, the weight of the rifle reassuring against my back. The usual sounds of the woods seemed muted, as if the forest itself were holding its breath. I paused at a bend where the water slowed and noticed the tracks pressed deep into the soft mud along the bank, larger than any bare paw I'd ever seen, but narrower, with a strange uneven gait that made my skin prickle. I knelt, running a gloved finger along the edge of one print, feeling the cold, damp earth give way beneath my touch, and a chill ran up my spine that had nothing to do with the morning air. Something big was out here, something that didn't belong. I stood, checked the load in my rifle with fingers that suddenly felt clumsy, and kept moving, but now every snapped twig made me pause, and every shadow between the trees seemed to shift when I wasn't looking. I stopped once, heart hammering, convinced I heard something moving parallel to me on the far bank, but when I turned there was only the empty woods and the steady flow of the stream. Another time a branch cracked behind me and I spun, rifle half raised, only to see a pine cone drop from a tree overhead, shaken loose by the wind. The false alarms left me jumpy, my nerves stretched tight as a bowstring. By midday the air had grown heavy and still, the kind of stillness that comes before a storm even though the sky above the treetops was clear. I stopped at a small clearing where a deer carcass lay half-eaten, the ribs picked clean and the head twisted at an unnatural angle. The smell hit me first, raw meat in something sour like spoiled blood, and I backed away slowly, eyes scanning the underbrush, every muscle tight. That's when I heard it, a low, wet breathing sound coming from the shadows just beyond the tree line, too deep and ragged to be human. The sound moved with me as I retreated, always just out of sight, keeping pace no matter how quietly I stepped. My heart hammered against my ribs as I raised the rifle, finger tightening on the trigger, but the breathing stopped the moment I looked down the sights to aim. For a long moment nothing moved. Then something shifted in the darkness, something massive and low to the ground, with eyes that caught the light and reflected it back like twin coals. It was a beast, scarred and hairless, its raw mottled hide stretched tight over heavy muscle, the skin grayish and cracked in places like old leather left too long in the sun. Its muzzle was torn and scarred, yellowed broken teeth visible when it opened its mouth to breathe, and long black, curved claws, each one longer than my fingers, stained dark with old blood. The creature didn't growl or charge at first. It simply watched me, head tilted, as if studying the man the way a man might study an interesting insect. I fired. The shot cracked through the clearing, then smacked into the corrupted skin of the beast. Anger flashed across the wild thing's mangled face, and the beast roared, a sound that shook the leaves from the branches above me and sent birds exploding into the sky. The beast moved fast as it charged, faster than my legs could ever carry me. It wasn't but 15 seconds before the massive beast was on my heels. In my panic, I hadn't thought ahead. I had run to the edge of a cliff with pooling, greenish river beneath. I sensed the massive thing behind me and felt its hot breath on my neck. I swung halfway around, just enough to glance at it to see it swiping one massive paw across my side. The blow lifted me off my feet and sent me tumbling over the edge of the cliff, the world spinning as I fell toward the dark pool of river water below. I hit the surface hard, the cold shock knocking the breath from my lungs, and sank into the green depths. When I broke the surface, gasping, I could hear the beast moving above me, circling the long way around the bluff because it couldn't follow me straight down. That gave me time, precious borrowed time, to drag myself onto the rocky shore, clutch my bleeding side, and catch my breath before it found another way to reach me. I hauled myself onto the rocks, water streaming from my buckskin shirt, the wound in my side burning like fire. The beast's roar echoed off the bluffs above, closer now as it circled the long way around, each heavy footfall sending small stones skittering down the cliff's edge. I knew I didn't have long. My eyes scanned the rocky shore and found a thick, straight branch half buried in the mud, nearly 3 meters long, sturdy enough to take the weight of a beast that size. I yanked it free, sending bouts of pain throughout my injured side. I drew my sheath knife and worked fast, shaving one end to a wicked point while the blood from my side soaked into the damp earth, the metallic smell mixing with wet rock and pine. The sound of heavy paws on stone grew louder, that same low, wet breathing carrying the faint stink of old blood and rot. I scrambled to my feet, the makeshift pike heavy in my hands, and backed toward a narrow gap between two boulders where the ground sloped upward. I jammed the dull end deep into the soft soil, leaving the sharpened tip angled low, so it wouldn't catch the beast's eye too soon. I waited, heart pounding, the wound in my side throbbing with every heartbeat. The beast appeared at the top of the slope, its scarred, hairless hide glistening with sweat, eyes fixed on me with a terrible, mindless hunger. It charged, reared up on its hind legs with a bellow that split the air. Only then did I raise the tip of the makeshift pike, angling the point upward at chest height, just as the creature came crashing down. The pike drove straight through its lower neck with a wet, splintering sound. The full weight slammed into me, knocking me backward, but the branch held, buried deep in the ground, impaling the beast as it thrashed and roared. Hot blood mixed with foamy ropes of saliva, thick and yellowed, poured from its torn muzzle over my hands and face. The thrashing slowed, then stopped. The great body sagged, its weight pinning me to the rocks. I lay there beneath it, gasping, until the last shudder passed and the forest fell silent again. Only then, staring up at the raw, mottled hide stretched over the massive frame, did I finally understand what I had killed. It was a grizzly bear, ravaged by mange, its fur gone, its skin raw and terrible in the daylight. A bear, not some nightmare beast from hell, just a sick, desperate animal driven mad by pain and hunger. And I knew even then how highly uncommon it was for a grizz to suffer such a thing. I lay pinned beneath the dead weight for what felt like hours, my breath coming in ragged gasps, the hot blood cooling on my face and hands. With a groan I pushed against the massive chest, but the dead weight wouldn't budge. The makeshift pike had snapped under the impact, leaving a jagged shard still buried in the creature's ribs. I worked my way sideways, inch by inch, until I could roll free onto the rocks. My side throbbed where the paw had caught me. The buckskin was torn and soaked with blood, both mine and the beast's. I sat up slowly, wiping my face with a trembling hand, and stared at the body sprawled across the shore. In the daylight the raw, mottled hide looked even more terrible. Patches of grayish skin stretched tight over heavy muscle, the muzzle scarred and torn, the eyes already glazing over. I got to my feet, wincing, and retrieved my knife from where it had fallen. The rifle and pistol were lost somewhere in the pool or on the rocks below the cliff. I'd have to come back for them later if I could. For now I needed to get back to camp, to the mule and the cart, before the wound in my side grew worse. The walk would be long and painful, but the thought of my wife waiting for me, of the land claim that needed my hands to make it real, gave me the strength to start moving. I climbed the slope carefully, one hand pressed to my side, and didn't look back until I reached the top. The forest was quiet again, the way it had been that morning, but now every shadow seemed to hold the memory of that low, wet breathing. I kept walking, the pain in my side a steady reminder that I was still alive, that I still had a reason to make it home. I reached the clearing as the last light was fading from the peaks. The mule still hobbled where I'd left it, the cart untouched. My side was stiff and aching, the blood dried stiff against the buckskin, but the bleeding had slowed to a sluggish ooze. I washed the wound in the stream, the cold water biting deep into the torn flesh, then bound it tight with a strip of canvas torn from the cart, my fingers clumsy with exhaustion. I loaded what furs I had into the back, the familiar weight of them a small comfort against the throbbing in my side. The mule snorted and stamped as I hitched it up, ears twitching at the smell of blood on me, and it took me 3 tries to get the traces fastened with my wounded side protesting every movement. I climbed onto the seat, took up the reins, and started the long drive back toward the settlement, the wheels creaking over the uneven ground. The forest closed in behind me, but I didn't look back. Every shadow between the trees seemed to hold the memory of that low, wet breathing, and every rustle of leaves made my hand tighten on the reins. I had the furs, I had my life, and I had a wife and a land claim waiting for me. That was enough. Yet on quiet nights, long after I made it home and built the cabin and plowed the first fields, I would sometimes wake to the sound of phantom low, wet breathing just beyond the door, and I would lie awake until dawn listening, knowing that whatever had followed me out of those woods had never truly let me go.